So, you know, it's very, very, very difficult to make a decision like that. You have to weigh out every option that there is because you don't want to make a mistake that you're going to regret. Like, we were just talking about this before we started recording today. Like, Nache actually failed to voice her opinions to me, which really matter, So I listened to her, even when I don't want to hear what she has to say. But she kept from me that, her feelings on the brick and mortar. But I'll let her talk about that,
Okay. So let me, and I would love for everybody to come to the website and comment and let's talk about Fashion Trucks, the Facebook page, the private Facebook page. But what I was telling Astral when she first came to me about that she wanted to start a brick and mortar store, and she was kind of giving me the reasons why, like she's going to have this large furniture, she just always wanted to have a store, whatever. In my head, I was just like, why would she do that? Because it seems like brick and mortar stores have the most fail rate. They're not mobile. You have to be in the stores for, set days and set times for the most part. There's some, we're going to get into it, like some pros also, but I'm just like, man, why not do baby steps? Like, continue to build your online store and then maybe just get a fashion truck, because even I know in DC at the Eastern Market, there aren't any fashion trucks there, but people sell large, furniture pieces. So I'm like, man, she could even have like a little hitch or a trailer on the back of her fashion truck with those larger pieces. People will then know that when she's going to be somewhere, that they could just come with their pickup trucks to pick up like maybe those larger items. So I'm like, there's a way to work that out without having to actually going with the most risky of all three as far as fashion truck, online store, or brick and mortar. So I'm thinking this in my head, but several months ago, as she was telling me about like her dream of opening this store, I didn't want to kill the dream. I didn't want to be that friend that told her like, not so much,
But you know me, like, okay, here's the thing. With a brick and mortar, I do the interior design thing, and I picture things in my head. Like, I can have this big, beautiful shop and I can decorate it the way I want to. I can have my office where I can also do design consultations and this and that. So that is the appeal to me of a brick and mortar. I want people to be able to walk in off the streets and be like, oh my God, your stuff is so beautiful. And then blah, 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 But I guess you didn't think of those things, huh?
well, this is my thing, is you could get that with a fashion truck. Because, look at all the beautiful fashion trucks. Like, because I know your thing is home decor. And so people who haven't seen Astral's work, like you can go to astralriles.com. We'll have it in the show notes just to check her stuff out. She's been on apartment therapy and design sponge too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the thing about it is, yeah, you love that, but you could do the same thing in a truck, right? And people can walk in. It's almost like the finance bar who we interviewed a while back. Like when you look at her truck, it's like a living room. It's gorgeous. So
it is.
I feel like you could do the same thing. You don't have to have a brick and mortar in order to do that.
True.
But okay. Here's the thing. And I wanted to let you guys out there know that there's no right or wrong here, right? It just kind of depends on what makes sense for you financially, as far as kind of like your life and your family. There's so many different factors that go into this decision. But for me, knowing Astral, I just was like, she's going to hate having to go to a store at 8:00 every morning, or having to pay like staff, or knowing that she's not going to make a profit in the first year. She's going to go bananas. So me knowing her, I was like, I don't know. And so I wanted to be the supportive friend instead of doing what I normally do, which is tell people like, you might want to rethink that.
Wrong instance to make this decision. Okay. So let's hear your list of cons for the brick and mortar.
Okay, can we do this a little differently? So I've got I made this quick Excel sheet in our little Google spread. I said Excel sheet. I meant Google spreadsheet. I made this quick spreadsheet in Google. So I just have a list of things that I think people should consider based on all the podcast interviews that we've done, all the podcasts I've listened to, and based on all the articles that I've read. And for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm a sponge. I like to read anything and everything about business and then just learn how people apply it and then apply it to my own business if applicable. So let's first start out with legitimacy, right? So I think with the brick and mortar store, what I mean by legitimacy is that sometimes people feel that you're a legit business because they're like, you're in a mall or you're in this right, square, right? Versus a fashion truck. People are like, should I go in this fashion truck? And versus online where people are like, well, is this a shady online site? So
right. Can I touch it? Can I feel it? Can I really inspect it to see if it's what I really want?
Correct. So brick and mortar, just, usually initially you already have that legitimacy just because you are in a place where they could see that you are real and you're like this respected store owner. Not to say you aren't if you're a fashion truck or an online store, but you just have to work to build that trust. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that is cost, right? So let's start maybe with the online store. It's nothing to put up an online store. You could go to Etsy right now. You pay some listing fees, bada bing, bada bam, you're up, right? But then you have levels. You could have your own WordPress site, your own Shopify site, your own, Squarespace site. You could get a site custom built. So depending on what level you do, the more money you spend, on hosting and purchasing a URL and so forth. And, you have to, either you're making the products or you're selling the products, but so you have to actually invest in the products. So depending on how many, the different variety of products you want and how many of each type of product you're purchasing, the cost could go up, but you have a lot of control over it. You could start out with a very small store, or with limited merchandise and people wouldn't care less. Then you get to a fashion truck. And that could be, I say anywhere between $5,000 and $50,000. I mean, the range is crazy. It depends on the city you're in, how lucky you are as far as the truck. If you decide to get a wrap or not, do you have to gut the truck, the merchandise you're going to put in the truck? I mean, it depends. And then with the brick and mortar store, I would say it goes up a little bit more, maybe 15 to 100K or 20,000 to 100, because you got to pay for a lease. You got to pay for the products. You got to pay for staffing. Insurance might be a little bit more. You do have to pay insurance on the fashion truck too, but everything is a little bit more with the brick and mortar.
Yeah. And then with the brick and mortar, you have to think about what your product is, how much space you're going to need. And the larger the square footage, the more expensive your rent is going to be. And I was talking to a realtor friend of mine and, because we were discussing what I wanted to do. And she was telling me that, you have to expect anything, be prepared for anything, because when you're looking for a place, it could be in a strip mall, or it could be just a standalone building or whatever. What do you want to have? Do you want to have a big window where people can see your products when they're walking by? What is it that you need? Because you have to figure out what you need and then start looking for the space. And what she was telling me is that if you go through one of those big corporate owned, the big businesses, like if it's in a retail mini mall or a big complex or something like that, they're going to expect more from you as far as with your application. And they do credit checks, background checks. They are going to expect a longer lease term as well. So are you going to be able to sign a 2-year lease or 3-year lease? Do you want to do that, considering this is what you're going into for the first time? Versus if you go to one of those mom and pop owners who have like a little storefront with an apartment on top or something like that, they might not ask for all of that. They might just do a credit check or something like that and require like a 6-month or a year lease. So you have to take in account those things too. Like for myself, I can't see myself signing a 2 or 3 year lease. I can't do that. I can't afford that.
Right. But these are the things that with a brick and mortar, like you have to be prepared to make this type of commitment. And so when you first told me about that you wanted to do that, I'm just like, wow, like you're going for the gold, right? Like you're going for the gusto, like the most expensive business category, at least out of the 3, online fashion truck and brick and mortar, which is fine. But the question is, do you have the capital to do that? And do you want to be locked in to a space that long, right? Another category to think about too is, profit. And we talked a little bit about that. We've talked to some people who have owned brick and mortar stores, and usually that first year you do not make money. Second year, if you're lucky, maybe. So you have to be okay with not making money and still have to figure out how you're going to pay your bills, right? So either you have to have a nice little savings account, or you have to be like living with someone or have some other type of support. But the thing about it, I mean, it's like in any business, especially with brick and mortar and fashion truck, they say, those businesses barely last. Like, a lot of them fail in their first year, be lucky to make it for 3 years. And if you make it to 5, it's like, wow, you are amazing. Right. So, knowing that like you might not even be able to make a profit for a couple of years and you've invested all this time, it's like you have to be pretty committed to this. And it's just got to be a risk that you're comfortable with taking, which a lot of people have, and a lot of people have been very successful with. So I'm not knocking it at all. But I feel like with the fashion truck, we've talked to several fashion truck owners that have made a profit in the first year. Not all of them, because it depends on the location. It depends on the type of products that are in the truck and how popular they are. And it just depends on that person too, sometimes, because, how much effort are they putting into marketing and building relationships with media, other truck owners, other, people who put on events to make sure that they're out there and making money. But it's not unheard of. A lot of truck owners can make a profit, even if it's small, in that first year. Yeah. And then, of course, online, because that's the low hanging fruit, because it's so cheap to open up a store. Even if you like sell $100, you've probably already made back either your hosting fees, your listing fees, or whatever else. But, you still do, of course, have to put in that effort to market yourself, maybe get out to events in order to get yourself known. But it's like the online store and the fashion truck, to me, is like if you're trying to build wealth not fast, but build wealth in that first year. And also if you're just trying to make sure that your idea works and it's something that people want, then those two seem like the smartest option. And then if your love is to then, or your goal or dreams are then to start a brick and mortar, then you've legitimized that idea and then you could go to that next step.
What I also worry about is that, how things have, there are certain trends that go around. Well, the wall hangings are a trend that just started maybe like a year ago or something like that. What if it goes out? What do I do then?
Right. That's true.
So,
But I mean, I guess for you, you were thinking of selling other things too from other vendors. So,
right.
You would just have to constantly figure out like kind of what are people looking for and then just kind of go with it.
Yeah. But if I just stuck with online though, I'd be kind of screwed if the wall hanging trend took a turn for the worst.
Correct. Whereas if you went with the fashion truck or the brick and mortar, you could definitely sell a variety of things, right? Because on the online store, it's like you would never sell my stuff on your store. It wouldn't make sense. Whereas if you have like a truck or a store, you could sell sell products from wherever.
So keep in mind that either way, there is risk.
Oh,
either way,
absolutely.
especially if you plan on doing it full time, like leaving your corporate job or whatever to do it full time, there is going to be risk.
Correct. And then what else? So we've talked about legitimacy, cost. We've talked about profit. One thing that Estrella and I were talking about too before this call is just kind of like the legal aspects too, because Estrella's like, okay, if she does this brick and mortar, she has to get this business license. She got to get insurance. I mean, there's just all kind of stuff, right? Like even for like the staffers, like having staff working in the store, you have to figure out kind of the legal aspects of that. Now with the fashion truck, there are still some things you have to do. They might not be as expensive as the brick and mortar and not as many things, but it might be trickier to find out at least what you have to do, because if you're in a state that doesn't have many fashion trucks, they don't know what to do with you. so you kind of are like helping them make up the laws, like as you go along. So that part, is like, I feel like the trickiest part with fashion trucks, whereas brick and mortars, things are established, but there's just a lot to do and a lot of money to spend. And then kind of online, of course, you have like some legal things to do, not as much because I feel like people can get away with a little bit more, but there are still some things that you might want to set up to protect yourself on an online store, if you have an online store.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nache, you did a lot of research. All right. This is why I always come to you when I need information, because I know that if you don't know it, you're going to find out.
There was like a little bit of sarcasm in there. And then location. So I was telling Astral, I'm like, Astral, if you get a brick and mortar store, you're going to be stationary. You're going to have to set days and set hours. Like I was telling her, there's like a couple of stores in DC where it's like they're only open like 3 days a week, and some are just like by appointment only. I don't go to those stores because you know what? I don't have time to keep up with someone else's schedule, right? Like, well, at least I'll take that back. Well, what I don't have time for is like, if I'm in an area, let's say if I'm in the Bethesda area or the DC area or the Arlington area, and I'm like, ooh, I want to stop by this store because I know it's there, and I go there. All the other stores in that block are open, but that store, I'm like, really? I don't know. For some reason, for me, that bothers me. So to me, a brick and mortar store, in order to be successful, they need to be open when there's foot traffic, and they need to have set hours because people expect those things to be predictable. So if they know they're in Georgetown or whatever, you guys have in your cities, like stores are normally open to 8:00 or 9:00. Whenever you see a store that's closed, you're just like, why are they closed? And I'm not saying that that's true across the board. I'm sure there's tons of successful stores that make their own hours, and they have like, clientele that are loyal. And so to them, it doesn't make a difference, like when they're open. So it's just something to keep in mind. But for me, I'm like, I just didn't think Astral could be tied to, I don't know, going to one location every day. I don't know. And then, were you going to say something, Astral?
No, I mean, I can, because it's something that I really want to do. So if it's not like tedious type of work. So it's not going to be like bothersome. So I don't mind that structured work schedule.
Well, okay. I would say with that, another thing like that's on my list, but I'll just kind of tie it into this is weather. We'll get into that a little bit more, but like when it's raining, you might not want to go in, but you're kind of still expected to.
I understand.
Um, and where with a mobile boutique, what I like about it, even though everything has its pros and cons, is as far as like the location, you're picking events and yes, you have to be there. You have to do a little bit more work to let people know where you are. So there are going to be people who are going to be like, I don't have time to figure out your schedule. But if you're choosing events where people know that there are going to be like cool vendors there, then you can rely solely on the foot traffic for those, those particular types of things. And then you have like the online store, and that has no geographic boundaries, right? Which is nice. So you can, whereas, at Stra, if you open up a brick and mortar in Chicago, or a fashion truck, you're only, for the most part, getting Chicago people, right? That are at these events or maybe tourists. Whereas an online store, just like now, you might be selling stuff to people in California, Denver, New York, what have you. So your reach actually is a little bit more, which is why it's always suggested that no matter what, if you go with a fashion truck or a brick and mortar store, you should still have an online store, even though it's a little bit more work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then that gets me to the weather. I mean, so the con for the weather for fashion trucks is like if you're where we are in the Midwest, once it starts snowing, you are out of business. You get those heavy snowfall days. Like, number one, it's just risky being out there and you don't want people like slipping in your truck. That's like a liability right there. And no one is trying to shop in the cold in the fashion truck. Ain't happening. And with the brick and mortar store, your foot traffic is a lot less, but at least, probably more people will shop maybe in the wintertime or in the rain than they would. They'd shop at a brick and mortar more than they would shop at a fashion truck. But still, you got to worry about coming in, and knowing that there aren't going to be a ton of people there. And then of course,
and you have the utilities for heat and lights and everything is just ridiculous.
Right. Exactly. And then I'm glad you brought that up too, because of the weather too. And depending where you are, you may or may not need AC unit, right? Or a heating unit. It just depends, we did a podcast, our first podcast of the season, and they were saying, Nico and Birch, like they didn't really need an AC because where they are in sunny California, like it doesn't get that hot. So that's not something they would have to worry about. But I tell you, right now in DC, if you don't have no AC in your truck, I'm not getting in there because it's like, it is 90 and it feels like 103. So it's not happening. But with the weather, you have to think about those things. And then I would say for the online business, the only thing how weather will affect it, because the nice thing about online business is constantly making money if you're doing it right, is shipping. Because if you're like shipping something out in the dead of winter and Boston is like shut down because of a snowstorm, they might not get their stuff, in a week. It might be 2 weeks because the post office isn't operating.
Right.
The next thing to consider is like the hours. And this is my key thing for Astral. She's kind of like this, she needs to be like a free bird. She doesn't realize this, but she says now like, oh, if I love doing it, I'm going to be there every day and it's going to be magical.
Oh, no. Wow. That's how I said it.
She lying. It's like, no, because like in days now, if you have a 9-to-5 job, if you love that job or not, there's just going to be those days when you're like, no. And I feel like the fashion truck is, you can make your own hours. You determine when you're out there, whereas the brick and mortar, like we talked about before, for the most part, you have set hours and you have to be open a certain amount of days. And with the online store, of course, that's like great. You're making money while you sleep, hopefully, right? If you're doing everything right. So it's always open. You're just kind of maintaining like those orders. So you really can make your own hours there. So for Astral, for you, I don't know. I just think that's something you should think about.
Oh, you've given me a ton to think about. I mean, I wish you had have given me this information months ago, but or at least let me know your opinion. But I appreciate it now. So, Jesus.
Okay.
This decision is like, I just don't know what to do.
Well, here's a couple other things just to consider. Shipping. I mean, we talked about that. Like with the online store, if you're not organized and you're shipping stuff out late, that will kill your ratings and kill your rep. So that's something you have to think about if you have an online store, and tracking your inventory, especially if you sell in person and sell online. But with the fashion truck and brick and mortar, you don't have to worry about shipping. There's like this instant gratification. A customer comes into your boutique and they're like, wow, I found this beautiful skater dress and I love you. I've tried it on and it's great. But the online, they get it in the mail and they're like, oh, it doesn't fit. Then you have to worry about returns. And you do have to worry about returns in the other two also, but it gets a little trickier, especially let me back up. So with the online store, it gets trickier because they have to mail it back and then you have to make sure it's in, decent shape, yada, yada, yada. For the brick and mortar store, what's nice is like they can actually bring it back to the physical location. You see it immediately and then decide if you want to give them their refund. And for the fashion truck, it's tricky because you're at a different location every week sometimes. So you have to figure out like what your return policy is going to be. Can they ship it back to you? Do you have them meet you at another location? That's something I feel like that's come up in the group at least a while back. That's just, I think, really tricky when it comes to fashion trucks.
I think most people do all sales are final.
In the fashion truck?
Yeah, and online. That's what I would do.
No, I would say not online, because I would never purchase a outfit online if it was final sale ever. Unless it was like at a big box store like Ann Taylor, Anthropologie, and it was pretty reputable and it's on sale, because sometimes they'll have like final sale, but just like a regular product on sale online on an online store, and you telling me like, if I buy this and I've never seen you in a mall, never seen you anywhere, and I get this in the mail and it doesn't fit, like I'm just out of $100. You never get any sales. What?
True.
So I don't know that. Please, people chime in on the website or chime in on the Facebook group to give us your thoughts on that. And then, supporting local merchants, that's something you could do with all three. So that's pretty cool. We talked a little bit about staffing. Like Astral, like, you can't be there all the time. So are you prepared to pay someone to staff your brick and mortar store?
Good question.
Something to think about. With the fashion truck, initially you don't have to hire anybody, but if you choose to, like, it's an option. And with the online, of course, you don't have to hire anybody at all. And if it gets too busy, you can also, hire like a VA or something like that to help you. So that's something else to consider. And then we, have had people on that say like fashion, especially in the fashion truck industry, it could get kind of lonely. You're out there, you're in the different fairs, and maybe the other vendors, so you have someone to talk to. But if you don't, you're just there by yourself, and if there's like an hour or two that goes by without any customers, it could be a pretty lonely business. So sometimes it is nice to have someone there. So that's just something to think about too. And then, think about marketing. I think each category has its own pros and cons. Online is a little bit trickier because you're like maybe marketing to a certain niche, but all over the US. So you have to figure out how best to do that. The brick and mortar, like if Astral decided to like open downtown Chicago, she would have to figure out like what's the smartest way to attract people to her store. So I think, and then Fashion Truck with marketing, it's like getting media support, people, it's like figuring out like, how do you convince people to sign up to your email list or Instagram or whatever in order to know where you are, who you are, and so forth. So just something to keep in mind. Each one has its own pros and cons. Oh, and then, so Astral, merchant stores, right? Like when you're looking for spaces, right? Like if you're doing a brick and mortar store, let's say a big box store opens up like 6 months later near your neighborhood, they could suck up like some of the traffic or like your profits, which, you read about that online. And so that's kind of a danger. And if you're in a lease, you're like stuck. Whereas if you're in a truck, you could like move to different locations that don't necessarily have like those competing stores. And then I feel like, if you're online, you just have to be careful that you're not selling anything that like an Amazon or a Walmart is selling because they will eat you alive, right? Because if I see something on your site, like a soap or something, and I go to Amazon and it's cheaper, though I do want to support you because you're a small business, I'm going to save $3 and purchase it through Amazon and get free shipping. Like, I'm sorry, right? Because we all have to save money. Like, we want to support local, we want to support small business, but we all are also on a budget. So if you are selling this soap for $10 plus $5 shipping, and I see I could get it on Amazon for like $8 free shipping, where am I going to go? So as you're pricing your items and choosing, what you want to include, make sure that those big box stores will not eat you alive. And we're kind of whittling down the list. Exposures, that's something to think about. Media exposure. I feel like for fashion trucks, they're a new thing. So it's, to me, maybe easier to get media exposure. You can still get that with a brick and mortar too. But then also, and then online is probably the hardest, but also like exposure to people. I think that's a pro for big brick and mortar because people are always passing by your store. And if you do, let's say, have a beautiful window display or something like that, people can be like, ooh, what's this? And they're going to come in, right? Whereas online, unless it's put in front of them somehow, some way, you're going to get lost in the other hundreds of thousands of online stores out there. And then I guess for fashion truck, it just depends on where you are. You just got to be smart about it and make sure you're in a place where you can get kind of that exposure. And let's see, we talked about insurance already a little bit. Each decision has its pros and cons. I think it's probably most expensive to get insurance with a brick and mortar, but trickier to get insurance with a fashion truck. And we've heard that on the podcast before because insurance companies don't even know how to handle you all. And then for online, it just kind of depends on your business. And then the last thing that I'll say, and then I really want to hear kind of Astral's thoughts on all this, is accessibility. And so in a brick and mortar store, you have to make sure you set up so handicapped individuals can easily go into your store and kind of move around to your store. And so because that's been done in several different stores, it's probably easy to find someone who can help you to figure out like how things should be set up. For fashion trucks, it poses more of a challenge because you don't necessarily have a ramp to go into the truck. And then even the space in the truck is very limited. So it's just not really accessible. And then with the online store, it can be accessible, but you have to make sure your website is set up in a way where if someone is handicapped, they could, like their readers or so forth can actually like make sense of your site, having alt tags on your pictures and having your site structured a certain way will help with that. With each kind of like, type of business, you have to think about that. So that's all I've got. That's my thing, Astral. I've given you legitimacy. I've given you cost, profit, the legal aspect, location, inclement weather, the hours, shipping, supporting local merchants, staffing, marketing, competing with big box stores, exposure, insurance, and accessibility. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but these are just some things that I kind of like put together quickly.
I mean, hearing all of that, honestly, the safe route would be to stick with online and making my online presence a little bit more well known and market myself better. But I want more. So I don't, people, please understand that do not jump into any type of decision like this. You have to take the time to think about it. So I honestly can't give an answer right now as to which one I would do because I don't know. I still have to weigh my options out. It could end up that I decide to just stick with online, but I don't know that right now. I need to look at my money situation, and there's tons of things that I need to take into consideration.
I think you'll end up doing something. It's just going to be like, what is it? Because here's the thing, people. As I give all these different things, and maybe your head is spinning right now because I talk really fast and I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you, and I do talk a lot. This is the thing. It depends on your life, your situation. It depends on how much money, like we said, you have in the bank, how much money you could get. Like right now, Astral is trying to get the GoFundMe. So, maybe, if she meets her goal, then maybe that brick and mortar will be that option, that best option for her. But it depends on if you have kids and a family and how much time you could dedicate to this. It depends on the type of products like that you're planning on sale. It's just so much to think about, but really look at the list of the pros and cons and figure out like what you'll have like the passion to kind of keep going and what like just makes sense for you. And that's all I'll say.
So I'll keep you guys updated on what my decision is.
And we hope that you found this to be helpful. Like I said, please give us feedback on episode 56 on startafashiontruck.com. You can just go there and leave a comment and let's talk about fashion trucks. Tell me I'm wrong about something, or tell me I'm right, or tell me something I didn't even think about. Like, let's keep this conversation going to help other future business owners figure out what's what.
And don't forget, you can go to startafashiontruck.com and click the Ask FFT button to leave us a voice message. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this debacle of mine.
And you can find us on any social media account by just looking up Find a Fashion Truck, and we will come right up. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for giving us your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for parking here.